As a member of the Hispanic community and as the descendant of German and Irish immigrants and executive director of an organization that provides immigration legal aid, the image, the symbol of the illegal alien is a symbol of hatred and divisiveness. I believe that there are no human beings that are illegal. They may not be documented at a certain point. I believe that this image of the illegal immigrant is connected with a whole constellation of images. Images of the resource-sucking immigrant, of the anchor baby, sort of this whole constellation of images that surround often the Latino community, but also other immigrant communities here in Metro Detroit and around the world. I think that we need to begin framing immigration not as a problem to be solved, but as a phenomenon, part of the phenomenon of human global movement. People move. Yeah. They have since the beginning of history, of human history, and we need to decide how we're going to respond to that. And I believe it's not through increased enforcement that's linked with border and national security. It's not through proposed laws that we sort of joke about President Obama having to show his papers, but he's not alone, my friends. There are people every day in this country who are forced to show their papers, people who have been born and raised here in the United States that get stopped in our local area that have to show their papers. So I think it's a real struggle that I believe that we need to come together as communities to work together to confront and decide how we're going to respond in this current historical moment to the phenomenon of people moving.
Yeah. Curtis, fortunately for you, there aren't any stereotypes of gay people for you to have to deal with. I mean, same thing. You're continually minimized by stereotypes in the gay community, aren't we?
Yes. I am an out gay man. I've been partnered with my partner, Willie, for 14, 15 years. I live in the city. And I have like you, I also want to thank the NAACP for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity. The good Reverend have asked me to speak at the Freedom Institute last year. It was my first time having to speak in this forum about the people that I serve and partly about my story. I also just want to, before I go further, say to the professor how moved I was by your presentation. I'm familiar with the Jim Crow Museum, and I applaud you on all of the work you've done. And I also applaud the organizers who put us together in this room, because in this brief time I've gotten to meet some people who I want to have further conversations with. And I had this presentation, I worked very hard on it, but I think right now it's really about me conveying, Devin, yes, gays are the last group of people that you can legally discriminate against. And there are some things that me and my partner do not have the opportunity to do like my brother and my sister can do. I can't get married to my partner. Therefore, there's some benefits that many people here who are married know that it just comes with the territory. In some parts of the country, if my partner was hurt, and he was taken to the hospital, a physician could say that I may not have access to see my partner. I personally was discriminated against in the state because I was fired for being gay. I'm not protected in Michigan for being gay. That's the last discriminatory act that someone can legally use against me to fire me. I was fired. Now, mind you, I was fired when I was in my 30s, so I've never been fired before in my whole life. So when I was fired, I laughed. I thought, this is hilarious. Am I fired, really? And that's when I began to find out about laws, pertaining my safety in employment. It was devastating. And again, just gave me a further awareness of where I am in this nation. The one thing I did do was I thought, I could leave, like many gays and lesbians, bi and trans folks. They tend to leave their home. They tend to go to coastal cities such as San Francisco or New York, other cities such as Miami or LA. But you know what? I'm a Detroiter. This is my home.
Good for you.
My family is here. My family is here. My in-laws are here. My schoolmates are here. My neighbors are here. I love my city. And I can either leave like some of us have made a decision to do because they've not felt safe, but thank God for some people locally who are in their right mind, who understands what it is to really work together. I decided to stay to be a part of the solution. And so right now I operate KIC, which is an agency for gay and lesbian, bi, African Americans and trans African Americans, and we're located in the city. This is very unique. And I just want to thank so many people to make that happen, but who really made that happen are fellow Detroiters, because I'm really am excited about my community's ability to hold their arms open and allow a unique people like me to flourish.
Great. Nicole Fox, it seemed to me during Dr. Pilgrim's remarks about when he was talking about mascots, and we saw the Native American sort of the Indian T-shirt. I don't know if there's a group that's still defined as much in the American psyche as by stereotypes as Native Americans. That must be a continual frustration to you.
Yes, I'm very honored to be here. I wanted to say that I'm very also humbled to be on such a great panel of community leaders. But I brought some images. I don't know if you guys can see this all the way back there, but I didn't know exactly, what the presentation before was going to be, but these kinds of images are pervasive throughout the United States, and they structure the way that people think about Native people, and that leads to a lot of misperceptions, misconceptions about Native people. And, on the individual level, it's, when somebody finds out that you're Native, oh, I didn't know there were Natives around here. Oh, you don't look like an Indian. And even the most random things, like, do you live in a teepee? And it's because there's
no sense of irony, right? There's no, they're not, yes.
Really, one of the other things that I put in my also prepared presentation was, one of my friends, a young child, said, "Oh, look, Mom, a real Pocahontas," and that's how society is right now. Native people are seen as these stereotypical images, and it's hard to conceptualize a real Native person because there's other representations. There's not a lot of contemporary representations of non-stereotypical Native people. And something else I wanted to share was that shapes also how we make decisions. So children and people who understand or subconsciously understand these stereotypes are making policies for Native people, are teaching children, are providing health care in the community. And I really hope that with more forums like this that there's more people who are fighting against these stereotypes, because they're really detrimental to the community.
I read a great column online the other day that somebody was quoting somebody who had recently said all these illegal immigrants need to go home, and the writer of this column said most Native Americans believe that too. Pastor Mendez, as we get to you, I was wanted you to talk a little bit about, we got a lot of young people here, and I was struck by watching the images earlier today, especially the powerful ones to me are watching what we foist on young people, the little kids wearing T-shirts, holding their parents' signs. And we kind of, we can teach them racism. We can also teach them bitterness. One of the, among the many things that I recall that Kwame Kilpatrick said, this mayor, one of them that has stayed with me a lot was when he was asked early on about the riots in Detroit, and he said, well, I'm young, that's not a part of my reality. That's not a part of my life. And I think that a lot of the young people here today are almost in some ways getting to a point where, because I see this in my children as well, they're almost getting to be post-racial, and we can tend to pollute that if we continually want to beat them over the head with the past, and yet those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. How do we strike this balance with young people?
Yep. First of all, I want to join those that have already expressed their gratitude for this forum, and I really wish something like this could happen all over the country. We talk a lot about dialogue, but it's not really happening. And so I want to commend my friend and the NAACP for pulling this off. Let me preface my remarks, first of all, by saying that this is not an isolated situation, neither is it new. When I saw the image of the book, The Negro, a Beast, that book was probably written, as I recall, somewhere around 1903. But there were a number of other books similar that came out to justify and rationalize apartheid in America at that particular time. So that when we look at the history of America, particularly as it relates to race, there's a certain continuity that is dialectical in the sense of these opposites, and it's like a pendulum that swings in one direction or the other. After the Civil War, the beginning of the end of the 19th century, when racism became consolidated as an ideology, it became the rationale to justify apartheid in America. It was always challenged, but Du Bois talked about it in terms of the veil, and we saw a rupture happen in the veil after World War I, and another one after World War II, to make a long story short. Why was that important? Because people of all races were fighting against apartheid. And finally, that mountain came down. What we see now is a reaction, a counter-revolution, a counter-struggle to the gains and achievements that were made. And I think we have to put that into context. When you read Du Bois's Souls of Black Folk back in 1903, he talks about the reaction from white people when the slaves were free. And when the Freedmen Bureau attempted to bring them up, it's almost verbatim in terms of the language that was used then that we hear now. Only it's more sophisticated, and we're watching the new right confiscate and co-opt civil rights language, using our victories against us, and talking about a post-race America. In reality, they're in denial. It's much more subtle now, but nevertheless, the goals and objectives are the same. Yeah. And what I want young people to understand is they got to contextualize it and see the larger picture. Yeah. And that is, there is a movement, basically, and we have not seen this before, but we see millionaires and billionaires co-opting America through the instrument of corporations and banks. They have come out, they've come out front, and their agenda is very clear. For one, it's about privatization of everything. Secondly, it's about less government. which gives them then the right to exploit and oppress whoever and how much they want to exploit and oppress. Thirdly is to remove funding for social programs, which would certainly devastate most Americans, including poor whites, who are already devastated. So this is their larger agenda. And the strategy has been, and I would encourage everyone to read Shock Doctrine, is to exploit and take advantage of various crises. Right in North Carolina, we're fighting a situation now where millionaires have come out front, such as Pope and Koch brothers and others, who are investing huge amounts of dollars into these right-wing organizations to carry out the agenda. And they have moved on city councils, on school boards, et cetera. So I think in terms of looking at connecting all of this together, it's not new. There's a continuity, a historical continuity that has been in this contradiction and conflict forever, and it affects all minorities. And I wanted to say lastly that there's a relationship between Sambo and mascots. And so it's important that we oppose all of it, all of these negative images that make us, that reinforce inferiority, which is, again, at the heart of racism.
We're about to move into a fascinating period of time. I told myself when Barack Obama kept rising as a really viable presidential candidate the last time around, I thought, this is going to be the most illuminating election in American history. We're going to find a lot about who we are. I was wrong. It's his re-election when we're going to find out a lot about who we are in America. By the way, I want to quickly mention hello to everybody who's watching us online. This is being broadcast live right now by TELUS USA, so great to have you if you're watching us at home. Before we move, because I've now got a number of questions, and those of you who are still filling out cards, you can pass those forward, and we'll let the panel address these in just a few moments. But before we do that, I wanted to allow Dr. Pilgrim to weigh in on this idea, this conversation about where young people are supposed to be left with what they see today. I can see somebody walking through your museum and coming out really resolved to erase an ugly, so much ugliness in American history, but you can also see somebody coming out really angry and bitter.
I think the most common response people have, including young people, when they come into a museum is a kind of reflective sadness. If it stays there, then we fail, the people that work in the museum. This is my fear. I'll just do it this way. I gave a talk years ago in Madison, Wisconsin. And after it was over, I did what I did before I started here, which is to walk up to young people and say, what kind of grades are you making? Are you making all A's or whatever? And there was a young man who had listened to me, and he had really, really listened. And he said to me, what difference does it make? And I realized that I needed to change something about my presentation because we don't need me helping with the defeatism that is already a part of many communities.